Hello and welcome to the top 5 misconceptions about divorce and the court process. I am your host, Arizona lawyer Julie LaBenz. To start today, we're going to jump right into the list of the top 5 misconceptions, so you don't need to hang around to the end to hear what's in the top 5. However, I'm going to go into more detail about each one, and of course I do encourage you to stay until the end of the video. Number 1 misconception is that it's best to just let the judge decide everything in your case. Number 2, that you don't need to make any specific requests in your case because the judge will figure it all out for you. Your spouse said no to your settlement offer, so that ends all negotiations. Number 4, that lawyers are too expensive. You'll just handle all aspects of your divorce by yourself. And finally, number 5, that you must dwell on the negative aspects of your divorce. So that's the top 5 misconceptions. Before we jump into a discussion of each misconception, let me introduce myself. I'm Arizona lawyer Julie LaBenz. I've been licensed to practice law in Arizona since 2006. I've been a trial lawyer and a family law practitioner since 2006 here in Arizona. I've completed the trial college along with the family law trial college, and I am the owner and founder of LaBenz Law. We are a law firm based in the Verde Valley, and we accept divorce cases in Yavapai and Coconino counties in Arizona. All right, let's jump into a discussion of the top 5 divorce court misconceptions. First, that it's best to just let the judge decide everything in your case. I have talked to so many self-represented parties who have that exact mindset. They think, oh, I'll just let the judge decide everything. The problem is that this option takes the longest. To get time on the court's calendar and to go through the entire court process to get your matter in front of a judge, whether that's for a temporary order or for a final divorce trial, it's going to take some time, and you're going to be stuck in the court process for a while. It could be a year, it could be longer, depending on your case, depending on what county you're in, and depending on the judge that you're in front of. This option is often the most expensive route to a divorce resolution because it takes so long, and there's the preparation to present a case to the judge involved in the matter. It's most expensive in particular if you work with a lawyer. Going all the way to the trial to let the judge decide everything is going to require the attorney to put in the most amount of work, so it's going to be more expensive than, for example, reaching an agreement. The judge prefers to not make decisions for you about your family. The judge prefers for spouses to work together and resolve all issues involved in their divorce together. The judge prefers not to make these decisions for you. Of course, the judge will, but overall, in particular, when it comes to child issues, parenting time and things like that, the judges really want the parents to figure out what works best for their family instead of the judge having to figure that out for them. Number 2 of the top 5 misconceptions is that you don't need to make any specific requests in your case because the judge will just figure it all out for you. In reality, no, the judge wants to hear from you. The judge wants to hear what your specific requests are in regards to each disputed issue in your case. So, for example, in regards to dividing marital property and debts, what are you requesting? How do you want all marital assets and debts divided in your divorce? If spousal maintenance is at issue in your case, and you're the party requesting spousal maintenance, what grounds are you citing to show you're entitled to an award of spousal maintenance? And how much are you asking that your spouse pay you per month in spousal maintenance? For how long should that amount be paid? And can the amount and duration be modified or non-modifiable? If children are involved in your case, are you seeking sole or joint legal decision making? Legal decision making is regarding decisions for your children about their education, healthcare, religious training, and personal care decisions. Are you asking that you and your spouse make those decisions together for your kids under joint legal decision making, or that one of you have sole decision making? For parenting time, again, if kids are at issue in your case, what is the year-long schedule for when the children will be with each parent? What happens during the school year? What happens during the summer break? What happens during the holidays? And finally, child support. What is the amount of child support that you are asking the court to order? Number 3 misconception. You're engaged in settlement negotiations with your spouse. You make a settlement offer. Your spouse responds just with a no. No detail at all, just nope. And that's it. That ends the negotiations. So many people run into this pitfall. They're trying to work things out, and their spouse just puts a wall up, and then they don't push any further, and that's it. And that, from my perspective, is a misconception. You don't want to give up at no. Instead, if you get that response, you make the offer and you get just a no and that's it, I encourage you to ask questions. For example, what about, specifically, what about my property division proposal are you objecting to? Or what exactly about my parenting plan do you not like or want to change? So try to get past that no by asking some questions to try to get more details, really looking to identify what's actually in dispute and what is it. Is there anything in your proposal that your spouse is in agreement with? Can you narrow down what's in dispute and then engage in further negotiations on those points? Those can all be things that can help move the dial forward. If you get that no, you can also consider asking for a counteroffer. For example, you could say something like, well, if you don't like my offer, then how about you give me a counteroffer? How about you make a proposal to me for how you want to resolve property division, spousal maintenance, parenting time, whatever the issues are in your case. Rather than these settlement negotiations just being verbal, I encourage you to put your offer in writing and provide your spouse with your written offer, and include a deadline for your spouse to respond by. So, asking for a detailed response by a certain date to try to move things in a positive direction instead of just getting a no and potentially hitting a dead end. Also, if you've tried to negotiate with each other and you're just not really making sufficient constructive progress, then consider mediation. The courts do offer, at least in Arizona, they offer some free mediation services in many counties throughout Arizona. So you can look and see what your options are for mediation, and having a neutral third party there to help you negotiate these terms might help you reach a final resolution. All right, we're already into number 4 of the top 5 misconceptions. Many people think that lawyers are too expensive and that they'll just handle all aspects of their case by themselves. Now, of course, by themselves, excuse me. Of course, I agree lawyers are expensive, but this doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. Consider, for example, that there's this concept called limited scope representation. It's where you can work with a lawyer on a limited basis. In other words, do some parts of your case by yourself, and then some of the parts that are a bit more complex, you can bring a lawyer on board and just pay them for that limited scope of work. So One thing to consider in particular at the outset of your case, if you're trying to create a case strategy, in other words, trying to determine what your requests are to the court. What are your requests regarding property division, for example? You could work on your own proposal and then go or work on your own strategy and then consult with a lawyer and share your strategy with that lawyer and get their opinion on it. See if they think you're on the right track or if there's some changes that could be made to make your case strategy more reasonable and to serve you better through the divorce process. So you can theoretically create a divorce budget where, rather than the $5,000 or the $10,000 that a lawyer is going to request up front for them to handle the whole case for you, you could maybe designate, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, something like that, and then set up times to consult with the lawyer throughout your case to help you better represent yourself. So if you're going to work with a lawyer on your case strategy, you can work with that lawyer about what's a reasonable request for the division of your property. What are some things you need to think about legally? Is there a mortgage in both of your names? And there's issues that need to be resolved related to that mortgage or other debts or unique assets that need special attention when it comes to dividing them. A lawyer can help you with that. Spousal maintenance requests are quite complex. And so this could be a great time to get some legal advice about what grounds to base a spousal maintenance request on, how to figure out how much to ask for per month, for how long, whether or not to seek a modifiable amount of spousal maintenance. These can be a really good use of a consultation with a lawyer to get this information rather than struggling on your own to figure out all the ins and outs of what is a complicated spousal maintenance claim. If your case involves children, you can talk to the lawyer about legal decision making, whether sole or joint is realistic in your case. Maybe you're facing some complicated issues with your co-parent, and the lawyer may be able to give you some strategies to help you deal with those issues and start establishing better forms of communication. Again, if kids are involved in your case, you'll need to create a year-long parenting plan. So it can be really helpful to work with a lawyer to make sure that your proposal is detailed enough and that you're also proposing what looks to be like a fair and realistic parenting plan. Finally, child support. The lawyer can help you put together a child support worksheet to use in court. There's a lot of different factors to use in a child support calculation. There's lots of different ways to do it, and a lawyer can certainly help you put together a child support strategy and show you how to use the Excel spreadsheet that spits out a child support obligation amount. There's many different ways to use the spreadsheet, and the lawyer can help you create a really effective child support strategy. Some other things to consider in working with a lawyer on a limited scope basis. Let's say you're engaged in negotiations with your spouse and you're hitting some roadblocks. You could consult with a lawyer at that point and see what negotiation strategies they can share with you. Or maybe they're going to identify a part of one of your requests that really isn't that reasonable and where you maybe need to negotiate a bit more or relent a bit on your position. Can also identify where maybe your spouse isn't is making an unreasonable request and how to address that, or maybe certain evidence to gather to give you some more leverage in the negotiations to try to get you to a resolution. Additionally, if you've drafted your own court pleadings, you can have a lawyer review those for you before you file them. Make sure that your pleadings are on track. If you've reached an agreement with your spouse, you could have a lawyer draft your consent decree, which is the final court document that the judge signs to divorce you and has all the terms of your divorce agreement in it. So you could work with a lawyer to just draft that document for you. If your case requires what's called a temporary order, you could work with a lawyer to represent you either in pursuing a temporary order or defending against your spouse's request for a temporary order. If your case is going to proceed to trial, the lawyer could represent you just at that trial. Overall, working with a lawyer, whether it's a one-time consultation or a series of consultations and maybe some limited scope representation in court, the lawyer will help provide you with a roadmap for your case and can also help you know whether you or your spouse are being reasonable or not in how you're, in the requests you make to the court and how you're conducting yourselves during the case. Okay, we've made it to number 5. I find that so often spouses going through a divorce feel like they have to dwell on all of the negative aspects of their divorce. Now, certainly there's a lot of negative stuff going on. It's sad. It's depressing. There can be some really mean things being said back and forth. There can be some really hurtful actions taking place. So yeah, I'm not trying to just act like all of this is rainbows and no problem and why are you being negative. I definitely encourage you to feel what you're feeling and address that. Suppressing emotions isn't a healthy response either. However, I do want to share with you that a few years ago, I was at a lawyer training in Tucson, and they had a professor from the University of Arizona do a talk at this particular lawyer conference. And this professor shared a study that he had recently done where he had 2 groups of people going through a divorce. The first group, he had maintain a journal, and in the journal they had to focus on the day-to-day stressful events in the divorce and things that made them upset. It was like a venting journal, write down all the things that are upsetting you on a daily basis. The second group, he also had maintain a journal, but their journal was not to focus on the daily things, but instead to start focusing on the future. What were they going to create post-divorce? What new relationships did they want in their lives? What sort of relationship did they want with their children? So, very different focus between the 2 groups. And the result of the study was that the second group that focused on the future and on what they were going to create post-divorce were much happier. They had a better sense of self-confidence, of well-being, versus the first group that was more just, venting. They were much more depressed and struggled with the divorce process on a much deeper level than the other group. So consider that you're not required to just focus on all the upsetting things, and just venting on a daily basis, be it to a friend or in a journal, isn't necessarily going to help you get through this experience any easier. But one thing that could be helpful is to start thinking about, what do you want next? You're going through this tough experience, your life is going through some major changes, and you have the opportunity to create something new. What do you want that to look like? So what are you going to focus on during this divorce process? Are you going to focus on every hurtful thing that your spouse does or doesn't do? Are you going to focus on the hurtful things they do or the things you're wanting them to do that they're not, that then make you feel hurt? Are you going to focus on the past and analyze how you got to this point? And really go through the whys, and I should have done this and I should have done that, or my spouse should have done this or should have done that. Are you going to go into overanalysis? Or are you going to start looking at the situation, taking responsibility for your role, and start figuring out how to heal and move on to something that will bring you much more happiness and fulfillment? You're likely going to encounter a lot of conflict throughout this divorce process. You're likely already feeling it, whether or not the divorce has been filed or not. And I encourage you to start changing the way you perceive conflict. Because yes, conflict is uncomfortable. Conflict can be hurtful. But it is also a pathway to serious evolution, soul growth, and change. It's through some of those uncomfortable and unhappy situations that we figure out what we don't want, or we get really clear that changes need to be made, and then we can start moving in a new, more positive direction. So rather than, feeling that sadness, that upset feeling related to conflict, that anger, maybe consider evaluating the situation, evaluating your feelings, and start figuring out how to change the situation and move in a more positive direction. So you can be thankful for the conflict for helping you identify what changes need to be made. Now, with this vision of your new beginning, you have a big question to face, which is, will you assert self-love? Or will you continue to engage in certain patterns that could be self-destructive or, don't put you first? And one thing that I often see happen is one spouse will constantly frame their wants and desires around what their spouse will allow. Even if they're getting divorced, they will still do this and create limitations or barriers for themselves based on what their spouse's expectations are, or the rules that they've established. And what I'm asking is, are you willing to move beyond that and to start reconnecting with yourself to figure out what your heart and soul wants, rather than what has been expected of you during your marriage? Finally, will you learn from your divorce and evolve? There may be certain relationship patterns that have developed during your marriage, or maybe that you've had your whole life. And this is a potential opportunity to evaluate those and start looking to heal anything that needs to be healed, so that you can evolve into a better relationship that's more fulfilling for you. Okay, those are the top 5 misconceptions about divorce and the court process. Let's just do a quick final summary. Number 1 misconception is that it's best to let the judge decide everything in your case. Number 2, that you don't need to make any specific requests in your case because the judge will figure it out for you. Number 3, your spouse said no to your settlement offer, so that ends your negotiations. Number 4, that lawyers are too expensive. You'll just handle all aspects of your divorce by yourself. And number 5, that you must dwell on all the negative aspects of your divorce. Did you find this helpful? I sure hope so. If so, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to learn more, feel free to visit my law firm website, which is LaBenzLaw.com. I also have a website with a lot of free resources as well as paid for resources for spouses in Arizona representing themselves, and you can find that at familycourthelper.com. Also, there's links to other free trainings and resources in the description below. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best with your situation.